Dearly beloved, we're gathered here today, Left Coast Caveman, number 55. Left Coast Caveman, Left Coast Caveman, supreme being through modern hunting and gathering to include fitness modalities, nutritional modalities, and mentalities for your better well-being, for the better well-being of the planet Earth. Earth-dwelling creatures we call Homo sapiens, myself, and this individual who's about to enter the premises. Sylvester Weiss.
Hey, there we go.
Sylvester,
What's going on, man?
Sylvester Weiss joined the premises. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Very good. You're joining from your mobile cave in Sacramento, California.
That's it, man. The war wagon. We're here on premise.
Here on premise, Left Coast Caveman number 55. 55 feels like a good number for us to take a pause for a little while because 5 times 5 is what?
25.
25. The year is now 23, and I have a feeling by the year 25 we'll be looking back and saying, wow, another couple of years have gone by and how much further we've come.
Goes quick.
And I'm going to start by rattling off a few of the ways in which the Left Coast Caveman way of life has helped me out. As you know, we share fitness modalities, nutritional modalities, and mentalities for better well-being. And I am listening to some ambient music. If you can't hear that, this has been an experimentation of unorthodox fasting, let's say, which would be a micro program that we share. But as we speak, I've been implementing several modalities just leading up to this cast. I took a power nap on the floor of my Left Coast cave here, 10 minutes, a brain reboot, and then I was thinking to myself, how do I get some brain stimulation without disrupting my sleep? So I was chewing on a little bit of this. You can't see it with the background. This nicotine gum, this Lucy nicotine gum.
That stuff is killer.
And then I was puffing on a little bit of a cigar to get my brain flowing. I've got frankincense in the diffuser. I've got I know I'm missing something, but I'm thinking to myself, I was pondering leading up to this. I'm like 55, 25. I was going back and looking through the archives and knowing that we've got a long way in terms of tracking where we've been and where we're going with the Left Coast Caveman and supreme being through modern hunting and gathering. And we've been hunting and gathering now since 2017. It's when we started this project. And I was thinking, what are the modalities I'm implementing? What are the modalities I'm not implementing? It's constantly a flux of, to do or to not to do, if that makes sense. And I was, what am I not implementing tonight? Well, I'm not implementing the Scotch modality, the alcohol modality. Been going through, as we all do, going journey voyagers in this life, seeking the answers of how to achieve greater levels of well-being, achieve what it is that we're seeking to accomplish, being intentional with everything that we do. And it's always like a plugging in of these modalities that we talk about. And we had a good session last night talking about some of that kind of stuff, but then just thinking that here we are at 55, and I know that there's probably about 35 casts that we've recorded with these implementations that I do on a daily basis leading up to this cast, or noticing that there's a particular ailment. So should I implement this fast or that fast, or should I do this or do that? And all of these things is an orthodoxy in and of itself that we're attempting to lay the groundwork for, lay out there for our audience to absorb and to implement. So I feel like there's some work to do, and 55 feels like it's kind of a good number to hit the pause button and go back and compile and figure out where we are and where we're going.
Yeah. Some of those, I know there's some good episodes out there. I should probably revisit, as I know we've talked on a few different subjects that I'm a little foggy on at this time. I think we covered off on the 10,000 foot, 10,000 step rule and a few others. And yeah, it'd be good. I mean, we could obviously revisit a few of those, as I think a lot of that information is pretty germane to what we're doing today, and having a just a review as we go, because a lot of these things, I mean, I'm sure many viewers have noticed that certain themes come up over and over again, and it's for a reason, because they're important, right? Collagen, recovery, inflammation. I mean, and it's hard to unpack all these subjects in an hour-long bit here and there, especially as as we know with all knowledge, like it builds upon itself. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know, and that's kind of that's a part of what keeps us going, man, is to help one, learn for myself, learn, you're learning as well, becoming a better, more optimized left coast caveman, but also spread the good gospel and letting people figure it out for themselves, try a few of these things, and maybe becoming inspired by a few of them as well.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned wisdom, and I was having a conversation with somebody this week about that there are different types of wisdom. Essentially, there is learned wisdom or wisdom from experience, which we attempt to provide on the cast with our, whether it's a nutritional modality, fitness modality, or mentality, providing the cave implementations of these things, hunting and gathering these modalities, distilling them down, putting them at leftcoastcaveman.com in the format of a program, in the format of something that somebody can glean from. But then there's also this notion of divine wisdom, or wisdom. Divine seems to have some sort of a greater power connotation to it, and perhaps that's accurate enough, but also just why left coast caveman, left coast, of course, meaning the modern technology and we're in a modern era. We're no longer cave people, but the cavemen or the cave lady mentality is, I think, speaking to that divine wisdom, or that orthodoxy, if you will, of human beings, Homo sapiens. What is it that is in keeping with what we ought to be doing? And I've been giving a lot of thought to this. And as we're developing that, we're developing a roadmap while also being humble, in a sense, like you're saying, and parting ways with the influencer culture. And we'll have a micro program on influencer influenza and what to look out for, and these kind of things that we've talked about, because we are admitting that we're journeymen on this as well. And it's not perfect. And the modality, we throw that word out a lot, modality, but essentially what that is, from my perspective, are those pivot points where we know, okay, well, this experience isn't getting me closer to the path. I'm noticing that, and then I'm implementing a different modality. So almost a grab bag, if you will, or a one-stop shop, or a source that we hunt and gather for you and put them all in one place, so that you can plug them in as you go, depending on what your intention is, but still that overarching intermingling of experience and divine wisdom. Because I've had a really difficult time, let's say this week, with implementing what I would assume to be divine wisdom, and not necessarily seeing from my experiential wisdom if that's in fact the best way. And without unpacking that further, just saying that there needs to be sort of some form of a wrestling with it as you go. And that's why we also promote, like you mentioned yesterday, of people adopting their own way as a result of it. And so using the modality tactic to say, okay, well, tonight my intention is this, so I'll implement these modalities, but I'll know tomorrow my intention might change, and I'll have to implement something else. Kind of on always flowing through the yin and the yang, and recognizing that divine wisdom and experiential wisdom intermingle, in that your path is essentially two sides of the same coin. It's like you're either making progress or you're not, but you're always on the path regardless. You don't have a choice there. You are here. You're a Homo sapien. You are a conscious being, and so you have a choice. And that's what we attempt to, and that's why we emphasize the supreme being for that reason, assuming that people want to level up in life. Um, but you mentioned sort of, we've been talking for the past couple casts leading up to 55 about whether it's injury or whether it's internal types of turmoil, like this adaptations and what you need to do to adapt. And that's where the modalities come in play. It's like, and that's where I think the more the divine wisdom type modalities come in play. It's like, are there some truisms for health, wellness, whether it's fitness, nutrition, and mentality that run current no matter where you're at along the path, and that you can implement these as a form of base level no matter what you have to do. And so we talked about that a little bit yesterday in talking about like adherence and orthodoxy and adapting. And we've tried to distill it down a little bit with regard to injury. But what does one do when you feel a little bit more rattled on your path, or unsure, or kind of um, almost just shaken in a way and not really quite sure? Like last week, I was a little bit off kilter, or I was just really thrown off. Um, you know, would you say that that's where the orthodoxy of divine wisdom become more at play? I'm wrestling with this a bit. I'm wrestling with the idea of where is that more applicable. We've talked about walking, and for a fitness modality, and you and I went back and forth quite a bit on kind of, is that an appropriate metric? A fitness modality, should a human being aspire to walking a certain amount of steps in a day? What is the value of that? And I think your take on it was a little bit more of like, from a fitness perspective. But I'm sort of wrestling with it more in the form of like a divine wisdom type, like, how do I move my body in a way that's more in keeping with primitive man? And so that's why like the two intermingle a little bit, the divine wisdom and the experiential. It's like, well, am I trying, or the intention, like, am I trying to get in shape by walking more, or am I trying to just do something because I know that there's a rule that I must follow? I'm holding myself accountable. I'm adhering to a specific rule that if I don't, I'm not even ready to move on to higher levels yet.
So could you explain a little more about what you mean by divine wisdom? Like, if there is a way to define that, however you could. Are
Yeah,
there
and we talked about orthodoxy. Maybe I should read those paragraphs again, or I could probably cut them in. I could probably record them and then cut them back in. But let me tell. No, I'll read it. I'll read it here because I think maybe I can reflect on my thoughts a little on this subject a little bit better, because it's so I'll read it one more time here on the cast. I can't help how I feel. I can only help my response to it, the actions I take, the words I speak. And then in reference to beauty, temptation, desire, being in your field of vision, only orthodoxy, or I would say divine wisdom, these maybe, I mean, I think Jordan Peterson refers to it a lot as like, what is like a priori, or a priori, or just some kind of like a knowledge that's assumed, or a knowledge that I'm referring to it in many different terms, like either divine wisdom or orthodoxy, or just a set
Yeah,
of beliefs.
because that's kind of where I that was what I initially thought you were referring to, but I didn't want to interject that into interrupt your thought stream on it. So a priori means like a knowledge, which I think that is better defined as like as um as that divine wisdom more so than maybe like the orthodoxy, because like the a priori talks about it's like knowledge without experience, right? So for instance, I'm trying to think of a good example of a priori. It's like you have in your mind this idea of like how this experiment should run. Like if I add these two things together, this product will form. And you have this knowledge without actually without actually doing it or seeing it. It's like you have this knowledge without doing it, without and which isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? There's a lot of things we experience it without we have these in our minds of like, oh, I shouldn't murder anybody, right? And it's like, well, I don't need to murder anybody to know it's wrong. I know it without experiencing the act of murdering that it's like an immoral act and I shouldn't do it. So I think you're talking about like these, and I almost think that when I think of a priori and what you're talking about, these divine, this divine knowledge, like it almost seems like if I had to maybe cull it down further as an instinct, as like instinctual knowledge. That's like, you ever, I forget who came up with the theory initially. It's like one of my first psychology classes I took on the path to my degree. And it was, Henry, anyways, doesn't matter who it was, but he talked about one of the theories was that tabula rasa, meaning that we are all a blank slate when we are born, and then we learn as we go. Now, I don't think that's an accurate picture of what goes on because we have many of these instincts. Like for instance, like I'm maybe not as good as explaining the ones with humans, but with dogs, it's really apparent to me. As in, like, there's dogs out there that are they're herding dogs, and they grow up as puppies, and we separate them from the pack, and we have them in our house, and they've never seen other dogs like herding or whatnot. But for whatever reason, if they're around a bunch of children, they have that knowledge of how to herd, and they'll actually start doing it. This weird programming, even though they've never watched the programming of herding, they've never seen other dogs do it, but for whatever reason, they have that instinct to herd, the group. And it's like, I'm sure that happens to humans in some way and as another. And it's like, well, is that divine knowledge? Is that a priori? Yeah, probably. Is that an instinct? Absolutely. I think so.
You're onto something here, and I think that it's what you're speaking on, and it's a difficult subject to unpack, especially if both of us don't have a bunch of letters around our titles, and we're regular everyday people, and that's another part of Left Coast Caveman is making stuff practical and accessible. And it's like, I think you kind of explained a little bit like this difference between experiential wisdom. We're on the path, we're experiencing, we touch the pan and it's hot and we say, oh shit, don't touch that again. Divine wisdom for me is more like thousands of years of people touching that pot and writing it down and saying, or proverbs, you name it. It's in a lot of ancient texts or in just these adages and again, it's like a body of work of thousands of years of human experience that says, do it this way. And then as you are that dog that becomes that notices, okay, now I'm hurting. And if I would have just read this book that told me, yeah, when you're around a bunch of wild animals, it's better to herd them into a pile than it is to let them run rampant. And you see that that's good. And that's part of another downstream topic that we've kind of touched on, is knowing what's nourishing for your path and what's to be refused. And so the divine wisdom part of that is extracting out what are those things and adding them to part of the path, while also allowing room for experiential wisdom depending on what you are seeking to accomplish or what your intention is. We talk a lot about intentionality. Maybe your intention is to just run off the rails and have a good time. Is there any room? I mean, there's still divine wisdom in that, but the divine wisdom will tell you that you're on a path to destruction if you do that all the time. And so that's kind of the difficult mentality that I'm wrestling with. And maybe we touch back on it after we get through like an example of it through the nutritional modality and fitness modality, because I think that's where the experiential and the divine wisdom or orthodoxy, or I think it's referred to in many different terms, like um, standards, instincts, whatever. Like some of those are good, but we also have to leave room for experiential wisdom. Um, and I think the cave meditation for this particular mentality is understanding that there is both the experiential wisdom, but there's also thousands of years of, call it divine wisdom, call it just this, a truism. I don't know if it's making sense, but um, there are mentalities and fitness modalities and nutritional modalities that ought to be truisms. And
Would it,
there's
would,
also the room for experience.
would it be fair for any of those people that are big into simulation theory to call it programming?
Possibly. I haven't dived too deep into that. Maybe programming is accurate, but maybe it's reverse programming. Maybe it could be. Yeah, I think it could be referred to as that. I haven't dove into that, but let's get into the fitness modality first, and maybe that'll help kind of unpack it, because we talked about this concept of 10,000 step rule, that the benchmark ought to be 10,000 steps. And should that be a modality that we put our cave approved stamp on, as far as a base level, human beings ought to be getting 10,000 steps a day? I wrestle with that a little bit. I think it's more about human beings ought to be non-sedentary, and that having some sort of a tracking mechanism makes it easy for somebody to aspire to that. That if you're getting 10,000 steps in a day. And did you find any cool research on that? I mean, just from a health perspective, I've saw a lot of research suggesting that for every 2,000 steps, it prevents premature death by 8 to 11%. But we know that there's other factors at play there. But I want to stick to the health aspect of it first, before I then tie it back to the mentality. Did you find anything about like the 10,000 step rule specifically that suggests that it's a worthwhile objective?
Yeah. So let me just provide a little background on it, how we got onto the 10,000-mile rule. And it really started with me saying, I was just in a spiteful mood, and I said, fuck 10,000 steps. Like, I don't understand. This seems like another one of those convenient numbers that somebody threw out there. And it's now some part of some sort of marketing scheme. And it's, like, just, I'm always wary of convenient numbers. And so I started doing a little digging, a little research, and talking with you about it. I've actually become a little more, it's funny. I believe more in it now than I did before. So, a little bit of background and research, I think that's a great heuristic in itself. Is anytime you're approached with any sort of fitness knowledge or rules to how you should be doing things or what you should be doing, do a little research, and make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons, that you have, once again, back to intentionality. And so I went down the rabbit hole, and I noticed a few cool things about it. So first off, the history is kind of interesting. And there will be, still in the editing mode for the article, but I'll have that out by tomorrow, no later than tomorrow. And that'll be found under fitness modality and Left Coast Caveman. But so the 10,000 mile or step rule came from I guess the earliest notation of it came from Japan, and it came from walking clubs from like the 70s. So like these clubs with women, and they somehow, there's no like I haven't heard or seen anything that say like scientifically why 10,000 steps, but they arrived at that's what their intent was, 10,000 steps. And then it also got hijacked, or not hijacked, but co-opted by a pedometer company that used it in the 70s, early 70s, 80s timeframe, around there. So this is a concept that's been around for quite a while. And it's just obviously with the advent of technology and these, better technology past the pedometer and our phones and on our watches and whatever else electronic metric you might have. It's essentially something that's almost the gold standard now when it comes to, everything monitors your steps. And so much so that I was a little alarmed, noticed that I had, like, my phone had been keeping a steady tracking of my steps, despite the fact that I discarded that app like years ago, because I'm one of those cheap guys and I don't like to pay for the extra memory. And so I maintain a clean interface. My phone, I don't have too many apps on there. And the health app was one that I erased. But as we talked, and I was kind of curious because you were talking about how many steps you were doing, we were discussing more and more. And I was like, well, I'll download it and I'll start, seeing how many I do. And so once I, downloaded it, it actually had a record of all my steps for like the past like year plus. And so I was a little alarmed to notice that I don't move a lot during the day. Like I think one of the days I hit one of my heavy office days, I hit like 150 steps, and that was probably just me to the bathroom and back, and maybe to the kitchen. And so I was like, well, that's not good. And obviously with any exercise, like we don't need to list all the benefits, but like you got them. It puts a check mark in every box pretty much, just decrease of all cause mortality, lower blood pressure, better sensitivity to insulin, like you name it, it does it. So it's all in all a good thing. But I just thought it was interesting that, well, maybe start querying myself as like, well, maybe I'm not active enough every day. Yeah, I do my jujitsu, I do my weightlifting, but it's like back to basics. One of the important foundational bedrocks is like just movement in general, and that's something that's very left coast, as in like you're in your office all day, you're in your computer, and it's like, well, that might be a problem, and maybe I'm not optimizing my life the way it should be. So over the last week, I've been experimenting with it. And actually, as you saw, I did a little algebra the other day, which I was amazed to see that I could still do that and create some proportions, because I wanted to understand how long it would take me to do 10,000 steps. And as they define it, 10,000 steps is roughly 4.5 to 5 miles, and that's dependent on your gender, on your height, legs, stride, all those things. So it's a rough number, but roughly. And in terms of time, it takes about, and this is off of my metric, about 70 minutes to hit that 10,000 for a day. And I've been doing it for the last week. I can't say, once again, this is a small data piece, so I can't, come to any conclusions just yet, but I'm intrigued by it, and I think it's a worthwhile thing to do. I don't think I'm going to come away from it any worse. I'm not sure, I'll keep it going for a while and see how it pans out. Maybe, as we all know, it's a lot of zone 2. So you are burning, I think an extra 300, 400 calories a day. I mean, that in itself is a good thing. But yeah, I'll let the experiment continue. I'm intrigued by it. It's always good to get outside, take a good pause, think, meditate, walk, engage with neighbors, engage with nature. I don't see, so my big, just to kind of round it out, my big, conclusion on this thus far is got to move every day. And an electronic device to monitor your steps helps you understand what your movement looks like, and maybe helps you also set goals to, how much, you should maybe aim for every day and whatnot. So you get what you measure.
Yeah. There's a couple things. So you got to move every day. Or I think where you came from, in terms of where I came from as well, all right, why the value of a specific orthodoxy or truism or divine wisdom or whatever we want to call it? Let's call it let's put our own spin on it. A cave implementation, a cave meditation, a cave implementation of a fitness modality, a cave implementation of a nutritional modality. We are putting a stamp on something and saying, this is a truism for the left coast caveman way of life. And why there's value in that is because we all get busy. We're all get distracted. There's a million different things coming at us all at once. And I love how you say, do your research. Yes, do your research. And we're trying to do a lot of that for individuals, and know that when we put a stamp on something that says this is orthodoxy for left coast caveman way of life, this is a cave implementation, we've done our research, and we have no affiliations whatsoever with any other products, services, or goods other than supreme being. And that means for everybody. And we're encouraging people to, do your research and come up with your own orthodoxy, as you said yesterday. But why there's value in these cemented, specific 10,000 step or something like that, we're not leaving it at that. You mentioned like base level or back to the basics. Or when I checked in, I noticed I'm moving every day. I'm doing my jujitsu, I'm doing my training, but Homo sapiens back in the day, I mean, there's so much evidence of the benefits, not only from a health perspective. I mean, nobody at that point in time was concerned with, I'm going to reduce my premature death by 8%. It's like they had to freaking walk with spears in their hand, because their premature death could come by way of another tribe taking their resources. So that wasn't a factor. But here's where it meets the road for me, and where I would say cave implementation of this is definitely have a step counter, definitely be specifically aware of how much you're getting every day and make a conscious effort towards 10,000 or greater as a base level. 15,000 even better. 20,000 means you're really then achieving a non-sedentary state of being when you get to 20,000. Like today, I'm at 20,500. Every single phone call I took was walking. My desk was elevated and I was walking, or I'd make conscious efforts to walk back and forth between my desk and keep my papers in specific areas. If you're in a cubicle, it's like you can stand at your cubicle. You can drop and do 15 burpees every time you complete a task. Let's see, we got 10 minutes left, and then I'll kill this one and we'll move on. But a couple things. One is like, when you do notice that you're off the path, like how do you know to get back on? What are those key metrics? What are those solid metrics that you know to get back on? And for me, implementing the 10,000 step rule, or like putting my step counter back on and starting to measure that, made me more active. I can tell my thought process is better. I'm less likely to use junk modalities. I'm more active, and it becomes routine. I get up and move. Guam every single day. Get up and move. It's helped me deal with issues in my life, getting out and moving, and like using that as the metric. It's like I'm a slave to the metric. I'm a slave to that. I'm not a slave to sitting around stewing in my thoughts. And then you notice a change. It's like some of my best cognitive activity is on these walks. Why do you think it is that, like in Islam, I was reading about this student Ibn Battuta or something, set out from this whole pilgrimage to Mecca, started with his like 3,000-mile journey, and then he spent 29 years of his life traveling, covering 75,000 miles. A rite of passage in Aboriginal communities in Australia. What's it called? A walkabout. They spend 6 months in the wilderness, executing a temporary mobility modality, which is a nomadic lifestyle that does not establish a permanent residence and includes a significant amount of movement for religious observance. There's something to it. There's something to the modality of walking every single day, or making sure that you're on your feet as a bipedal hominid, as a human being, a Homo sapien. It's like, if you want to get back to your core state of being, or this back to basics, it starts with something basic like that.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, it is the most basic of basic, and in the name itself, hunters and gatherers. How do they achieve hunting and gathering? Well, it wasn't by a Tacoma 4x4. It was
Mm-hmm.
two legs and let's go. And so I think I couldn't think of one reason why not to walk more during the day. And I got a feeling that I consider myself an active guy. And looking at that, and every Friday I go on my run, and it just made me reevaluate. Well, maybe I'm not active enough, and maybe I can carve out a little bit of time every day. Now, granted, my walks are maybe 45 minutes, and that counts about 4,500, about 5,000 steps, I think. So about coming in halfway, but hey, it's better than nothing, right? And I think that's for anybody to think about. It's like, well, if that's what you can do it. Of course, I'm doing other activities throughout the day, jujitsu or weight training or whatnot. So it's not just a stop there, but I could think of like one reason why movement, walking shouldn't be done on a daily basis, and I can't think of any compelling reasons as to how it would harm you or degrade your life in any way. And in fact, like I'm interested in the ways that might make life better. Now, obviously, you pointed out the cognitive benefits of walking, and as a meditation, as a way to think better or more effectively or be inspired. And I think all those are very true. And I was also thinking about, well, what about the mechanisms of healing itself? Not just for the mind healing, but also for the body. Just this. Once again, I spend most of my day in a sedentary. I have a standing desk, so I do alternate between standing and sitting. But really, most of the day, I'm in a fixed, non-moving position. Now, by adding in more of that time spent in active, like your joints are moving, they're being bathed, their fluids and whatnot, and collagen turnover is increased by this movement. So I would bet there's also probably cool, and I can't confirm this exactly, but just based off of my rudimentary understanding of collagen turnover and protein synthesis and just healing in general, just increasing blood flow is going to help you heal faster. So just the benefits, I think, go on and on. It's like, just go walk every day. Do it.
Just go walk. And I would say, again, to reiterate the cave implementation, know thy numbers. It's the same in business. It's the same in life. It's one thing to say, I'm an active guy. It's another thing to say, I'm an active guy and my caloric output's been 75% higher since I started doing this 10,000 step rule. And that is a fact in my life. My caloric output jumped 75% just by implementing the modality of get a step counter, wear it every single day, charge it, put it on, hold myself accountable to a minimum of 10,000. Now I've been getting like 20,000 because you start to mess with yourself. You're like, well, how can I walk more? And like I said, I'm standing at the desk, actively trying to like walk. Like it becomes a challenge for yourself to say like, I don't want to be a sedentary being. In having that is a base level start for greater levels of well-being, which of course supreme being is one of our core tenets. So this meeting is gonna cut us off. So I'll kill it, and then I'll resend you a new link so we can talk about the nutritional modality on the same thread.
Good.
Be right back. Here's a break, a word from our sponsors, who's nobody.
None.
No sponsors, which is how we're going to keep it. All right.
And we're back.
Part 2 of Left Coast Caveman number 55, Supreme Being through modern hunting and gathering, fitness modalities, nutritional modalities, and mentalities, the better well-being of the planet Earth. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to discuss adherence to fitness modalities, nutritional modalities, mentalities. And so on that same note, as you were talking about, I consider myself an active guy. I would say most people fall under that same. Why the importance of an orthodoxy or of some form of let's just start calling it the cave implementations, Left Coast Caveman way of life, or this divine wisdom or some kind of truism or something that we land on. We talked about the difference between experiential wisdom and divine wisdom. Divine wisdom, let's call it ancient wisdom or whatever people are referring it to nowadays, but compiling a set of beliefs long held that have proven beneficial over time, thus short-circuiting the process of experiential wisdom. Do I really need to test this theory out as much as I should? Or can I, what we do here on the cast often is discuss how we've been implementing these things and how they've been changing us. And why the importance of an orthodoxy or of a set of beliefs or a systematic approach to your nutrition, your fitness, and your mentality, because these things get lost in the shuffle all the time. That's why we're building out this program or building out a system and building out an archive at leftcoastcaveman.com, making these modalities practical and accessible for everyday people. Most of them are free. Most, if not all of them, are free. The only value there is are short-circuiting this process for people, making it accessible, making it something that you can apply specific modalities for specific intentions. And it's like we're talking about back to the basics, if you will, or what's the base level. So if walking is one of them, that's part of not being a sedentary sapien. Well, what's the benefit of that? Clearly, and nowadays we're talked about a lower death rate, curing all kinds of ailments or benefiting all kinds of ailments, and also the cognitive ability or the meditation aspect or the fact that walking tends to find its way throughout religious practice. Well, that seems to be a divine wisdom. It's like, well, if they found it And same with fasting, I would say. Fasting seems to find its way through divine literature, the Tao, Confucianism, Christianity, Buddhism, Judaism. I mean, we're not claiming any kind of religious affiliation. It's just a acknowledgement of here's thousands of years of codified knowledge, and these things tend to recur. And so now with experiential wisdom, how do we then carve out more through the sake of cave meditations and cave implementations? And the same goes for nutrition, I would say. A lot of people consider themselves healthy people. But what do you do when you find yourself just not making progress? Like here I am walking as much as I'm aging, I'm not getting younger. I'm getting injured more, so I'm not working out as hard as I used to. Haven't hit the mats in a while. I've been able to walk quite a bit, and my caloric, and I feel better. I feel healthier. My skin feels better. My energy feels better. My thoughts feel better. I've been getting tired though. We talked a lot on the cast. There was when we talked about energy, and we talked about, I think that was in like even the 40s or maybe early 50s. I don't know. I should have checked, but it's definitely an energy give and take. So the more you walk, I have found like in the afternoons, like I woke myself up off the cave office floor here before this cast as a way to kind of reboot my brain. But there again, there's another cave implementation that we could talk about. These little power naps or ways to recharge. But with the nutrition, it's a very slippery slope and touchy subject, because it really depends. What we talk about here on the cast a lot is the intention, intentional eating, intentional nutrition. We don't demonize anything per se, except for when we talked about junk food, which was like the cast before that would have been 53. Left Coast Caveman 53. That we talked about junk food, fitness and junk food. What should you never put in your body? But other than that, it's kind of open. Whatever you're able to hunt and gather around you. There are modalities that you ought to implement for maybe specific times, specific purposes. And why I'm doing a lot of recap is I think here at LCC 55 might be a good pausing ground for us to regroup. But we've talked a lot about nutrition based on the season. Nutrition, I mean, what do you do about fruits and vegetables? How many should you get? There's an orthodoxy out there that says, and we've kind of scraped the surface of that a little bit, you should get 8 servings a day, or should you get 6 servings a day, or should you get more protein in your diet? Should you get red meat in your diet? Should you get more of a Mediterranean diet where it's fish-based and no red meat, minimal red meat? All of these things, there's so much. And how do you develop a truism around that? I would say based on the individual, based on the intention, and also like what you said, like research your orthodoxy, what it is that you're seeking to accomplish. But with regard to like a set in stone cave implementation of know thy numbers when it comes to nutrition, and know thy numbers could be a micro program that we put out. What are those key metrics around specific intentions, and what are the numbers around that? We talk about 10,000 steps as being kind of a base level for walking. Well, what if you're not? What are those checkpoints for your nutrition? When you take your shirt off and you don't look good, you're not gaining muscle, you're not filling that shirt out enough, so you got to buy a medium T. So to make your muscles look bigger, you want your muscle, or you're trying to lose, you're getting a little bit of a spare tire around the gut. And you say to yourself, well, I eat healthy. What does that mean? Oh, I'm an active guy. And then you peel back the know thy numbers, you implement the know thy numbers modality, and you find out, oh, well, I'm walking 150 steps a day. I do jujitsu. Yeah, I do exercise, but are you really an active guy? Or could you stand more? Could you be on your feet more? Okay, so are you really eating healthy? How do you know? How often should you check? What should you check? How should you check? What do you do?
Yeah. Yeah. I think most people would be surprised if they were to take some time, take a day, once a month, once a quarter, to check in and really like, and I'm not a big fan of like, I'm not saying you need to every day. This is a periodic thing, but really dive in and annotate what you put in your mouthpiece for a day to establish a baseline. And if you ask anybody, most humans are really terrible at assessing, right? Especially when it comes to abstract things like numbers and calories, right? These man-made conventions of what energy is and energy stored in food and how that relates to carbon. And but you think about, okay, well, how many calories do you eat a day? I don't know, 2,500. Cool. Okay. Take some time, metric it, write down what you eat. And the good news is nowadays it's easier than ever. And one of the ways that I check in with myself, and I do this probably once every, I would say no more than once, no less than once a quarter, is I'll metric a full day. There's this great app called, and once again, not a sponsor by no means, but it's called My Plate. You can download it for free. And you can literally just scan barcodes and input in the servings, or you can actually put in, like, say I had one boiled egg, you can put in one boiled egg. And you go, I ate this, boom. And it'll audibly metric all of your macronutrients, your protein, your fats, your carbohydrates. It'll, accumulate your calories, your K calories for the day. And you can do this all day long, just one day. Everything goes in the mouthpiece. You put it in there. And before you know it, you go, wow, I ate fucking like 4,500 calories today. Like you're like, now it kind of makes sense that I'm putting on, weight every year, and that and I'm not looking good when I take my shirt off, and I don't feel good. And maybe I am a little tired, more tired than usual. And I think it's a great way to understand, okay, well, 4,500 calories a day, that's probably excessive. I should start paring it back. Well, how do you know what to pare back? We got to measure it, right? And so once again, I don't want to say that this is something you should do every day, but I think it's a helpful tool. And maybe you do it for a few days in a row and establish what that baseline looks like. What does a 2,500 to 3,000 calorie per day look like? And once again, your needs are different. Everybody's needs are different depending on your exercise, your levels of activity, how many steps you're getting in a day. So all that stuff comes into play. But you can establish some baselines, like, I probably shouldn't, anywhere from what the dietary recommendations, which I don't really advise going off of, but the baseline they set is all nutrition metrics based off of a 2,000 calorie diet. Okay, so that's on the rather low end. But like, you think about, all right, so let's go 2,000 to 3,000 a day. Let's stay in those two confidence intervals and see what it takes to get there, or how you can stay in that within a day and still be satiated. Because I guarantee you can feel just fine off of 2,000 to 3,000 calories a day. Guarantee you can. And if not, maybe it takes a few days for your body to habituate to your new modality, your new intention of eating, meaning like you're not trying to overeat every day, because we can get stuck in a rhythm. We can get stuck in a habit of, every day at 12, I have lunch, I have a sandwich. Every day at 8, I have my breakfast. Every day at 3, I have my fruit and my nuts. And one of the things I started noticing for myself is that I started developing an unhealthy relationship with food, especially like midday for lunch. And I wasn't eating so much so because I was hungry. I was eating because it was fun. It was a reward. It was a nice break. I was enjoying the mouth pleasure. And though it was healthy food I was eating, but I was still eating more calories than I necessarily needed for the day, especially to achieve my goals, right? And so I went on this experiment, which I'm still on, of just doing protein for lunch, and once again, going from, a meal for me at lunch would be over 1,000 calories, whereas I took it to go into about 350 for 2 scoops of protein with water. And was it tough at first? Yes, because I missed the mouth pleasure of eating, but was I really hungry afterwards? No, not really. Now I've titrated in, like, on jujitsu days, I'm going to need a little more fuel. So I have like a can of tuna, or I might have, a couple of hard boiled eggs on top of that. But I'm finally like, oh, okay, well, and after a few days, you habituate to it. It's like, this is what I do. And actually, I feel pretty damn good. And oh, my pants fit a lot better. Oh, well, it doesn't take long to start thinning up. And I mean, those results are, I mean, once again, just having that agency of yourself. Now I'm intentionally eating, and now I'm intentionally getting the results I want. And it all started with knowing what I'm doing right now, measuring it. You have to measure it. And luckily, we live in this great time where you can easily measure it. I mean, and what's funny, one of the other side effects I was thinking about of using these type of apps is it does get a little time consuming when it comes to, say, you purchased a salad at Trader Joe's, and let's say the barcode doesn't work. And so you have to kind of enter in a few of the ingredients, and it gets kind of confusing, convoluted, and takes more time. And I got to a point because a while back I was doing it every day. I was really knee deep in it, and it almost dissuaded me. Just the fact of having to like artifact what I was eating, it dissuaded me from eating these things that had way too many ingredients. Like fuck that, I don't want to mess with, because I put in, like, I had ketchup or I had this sauce in there, and I put it, mixed all this shit together in a big bowl. It's like, you know what? I'm just gonna keep it a little more mellow. I'm gonna not have as many, because I don't want how many teaspoons. I mean, it gets a little confusing. So by itself, like that self auditing allowed me to tighten things up just for the convenience of it. It was also like, hey, I'm better off without those little things. Add up, those sauces, those that handful of nuts that you go, to the, when you're at an office and you have a bag of nuts by your desk, and you take 5 handfuls throughout your shift or throughout your 8 hours, and it's like, you know how many calories you just consume? And you weren't even paying attention. You weren't even really, you were just eating to eat. There was no intention there. You're just throwing stuff down your mouthpiece. Like, that's a problem. That's a problem I think a lot of people have, myself included. And so by self auditing and using these, understanding the numbers and baselines and having some intention, I think that's where you can really start moving your way towards a goal. And I think that's a big reason why we're here today.
So much good info, and that's exactly why we're here today. And you mentioned goals, and I'll backtrack from there. So we both are a fan of Scott Adams, and we know that goals are for losers.
I listen to him almost every day too.
But he's saying that tongue in cheek, which basically means have a system intact, have a protocol, a checkpoint. You don't know what you're really doing until you know what you're doing. And I'm just as guilty of as everybody else is, in terms of, I know based on when I track. And I would suggest, as a cave implementation, to take a whole week and track, or 2 weeks and track. It'll be fun. Like, it becomes fun because you start to see results really quick. And it's not that painstaking. Like you said, it inherently starts to guide your decision making into being better decisions, but you start to be just more knowledgeable about your body as a temple and the fuel that you put in it and its specific purpose. So let's say you started with a baseline, and I'm not a fan of counting calories per se, and I think the caloric metric is a bit misguided. I mean, calories in, calories out, but it's more important to focus on the quality of those calories and making sure that, I mean, the more you can lean towards whole foods, and like what you put into your body, of course, matters. But in terms of the macros that you mentioned, as like protein, fats, and carbohydrates, there's way too much information out there that demonizes each one of those categories. And you have to do research, like you were saying, develop a research around your orthodoxy and what works for you based on your intention. Trying to feel better, trying to look better, trying to be stronger, trying to be faster, trying to have more cognitive ability. We can dive into each and every one of these at this cast. That's what we do at Left Coast Caveman. What are the benefits of fats? We have these in the archives. What are the benefits of healthy carbohydrates? We have these in the archives. And that's why I'm suggesting a pause in our casting and more of a distilling, and then making this stuff practical and usable for people, and turnkey and accessible, because it's a lot of our information that we've covered. We can now move towards a more in-depth understanding of this. But in terms of base level, if you take those 3 metrics and you just peel them off like 33% of each and started there, how fun is it when you can start playing with that a little bit and figuring out what works for you? Okay, well, now, I mean, I wouldn't suggest doing anything intentionally yet. Just start tracking what you've been doing, your impulses. Like for me, if I'm hitting almond butter, sometimes I'll like scoop out, like 4 or 5 spoonfuls. That's a lot. You start to notice that that's a lot. Like that'll all of a sudden, like the end of the day, and I'll start the day with like walnuts or something, and whole milk yogurt with protein in it. And like I get a lot of protein, but I'm also getting a lot of fat. And so if I want to start noticing more musculature, getting more trimmed up and looking more like jacked, and like my getting swollen the workouts, it's like, well, more carbs, more protein, front load my day with fats, back load my day with carbs. like these things that you can play around with that we'll dive into. But I think the key cave implementation for today is know your numbers, know where you're at. And yeah, you mentioned My Plate. I've also used My Fitness Pal before. That one's pretty cool, and it's the same thing where you can scan and it loads in. But then once you do it for like 2 weeks, you kind of develop a cadence where you sort of know what to eat and what not to eat, and you will find foods that fuel your intention, and you'll start to get excited about it and you'll do it. But again, if there's some kind of, put a calendar lock on your phone that reminds you once a quarter or once a month or something. It could be, because you get complacent. For me, I haven't checked my metrics in probably a year. And even just today, I took my shirt off and I'm looking at it and I'm like, man, I kind of got like bitch tits going on right now. And just, I mean, I probably don't, but like that's what your mind messes with you. And that's another thing, like in terms of a micro program for Left Coast Caveman. And I went on a music fast, not to divert too far off this, but that's why developing a micro program around unconventional fasting, things like mirror fasting. What are these things you tell yourself? Like, oh, you know, I'm out of shape and I'm this and that. But those things do become important until it becomes like negative self-talk and all this bullshit that you tell yourself. But if you are noticing, look, I'm exercising, but I'm just not happy with my physicality or my physique. There's something in your numbers. Could be something in your numbers, could also be something in your cortisol or something like that. There's all kinds of different factors that could be at play, but you start with the basics. It's the same thing with the walking modality. It's like, are you doing the base level? Do you know your numbers there? Do you know your numbers in terms of your activity level? Do you know your numbers in terms of your macros? Know thy numbers. So start tracking, use one of those apps, and then refer to Left Coast Caveman in terms of intention, what you want to achieve. If you want to, I think base level, we could blast through that real quick. I mean, for me, fats are good for hormones, good for cognitive ability, particularly in the beginning of the day. I don't touch a carbohydrate until the afternoon, mostly. Protein throughout the day. Good for building muscle, good for energy, good. I mean, we've talked about protein on the cast several times. Carbohydrates, good for more of a full look. But I mean, again, the carbohydrates matter. I don't touch any kind of packaged carbohydrate, not bread, maybe I'll do some whole grain organic rice from time to time, like the pastas and shit like that. I don't touch. It's like mostly eating with what works for my heritage, which is like sweet potatoes, whole grains that I make myself, no additives, no preservatives. Like that's the kind of carbohydrates I mess with, and those are good for like filling yourself out, that like pump and that more of a full look, I would say. And then it's good for your brain development too. And your brain will start for that like glycogen restoring at night. So that's why I'll eat more carbohydrates the back end of the day. I'll get my carb macros then. But then again, I don't know, because I don't know, man. I haven't checked my metrics in a while. So I will definitely check my metrics and move on from there. But these are just orthodoxies.
Yeah, and set your own, right? Everybody's needs going to be different. My carbohydrate per day would be probably different than yours. My protein per day might be different than yours, so on and so forth. And you have to, I think, do your research, understand some of the various orthodoxies out there. Because here's one of the great things about diet, or maybe one of the non-great things about it, is there's a million different ways to do it, and everybody claims to know the best way, and they fucking don't. Chances are, in complicated subjects such as this, it's a bunch of different things, and it is highly dependent on your body, your heritage. I'm actually writing an article right now exploring those ideas of seasonal eatings and eating based off of maybe your heritage, because I think there might be something to it. Now, granted, I'll say it's a pseudoscience at this point, and my research on it will reflect just that. It won't be very scientifically based, but it just poses the questions that, maybe there's some foods you should be eating when they're available. And we live in this time where we have these amazing modern conveniences called grocery stores, and you can literally get, watermelon almost every day of the year. but maybe you shouldn't eat it every day. Maybe it's something you should be eating in the warm summer months when it actually flourishes and it's blooming and it's fruiting and whatnot. And then as winter comes by, you transition to more winter type crops like broccolis or I don't know. I mean, this is something I'm playing with as more of a thought exercise. But once again, this is just an orthodoxy of one of many. And I think it does really all start with the numbers and know thy numbers. And I mean, from a business perspective, but it feeds into all aspects of life is you get what you metric, right? Your results are oftentimes not just by luck. And I don't know any director that would accept that as your plan. Well, how are you doing, Nick? What's your numbers? I think they're good. Based off of what? I don't know. I mean, that shit doesn't work. You have to base it off of last numbers. You have to understand what you're trying to grow by. I mean, the numbers don't lie, and it's a great way to make these abstract things more palpable, make them more concrete, and then you can actually develop action plans around them. Okay, here's what my numbers are in my calorie intake. I'm going to experiment by doing 200 less a day. See what happens. One of my favorite subjects or I guess videos as of recent is I don't know if you've seen it. Fuck around and find out. Have you heard that? You see the little graph? I'll send it to you. It's good. But I love that. Fuck around and find out. You will. The more you fuck around, the more you're going to find out. Fuck around with your diet. Pull some levers, push some buttons. If you're not where you want to be, you're not feeling how you want to feel. You're not looking how you want to look. And most people are at a state of that. And to Scott Adams, to his credit, I mean, have a system to help you get to those goals, right? And the whole reason why, goals are for losers, because most of the time, if you're just going after a goal, you're going to find yourself in a state of not being at that goal, right? So that's why he talks about setting up a system and then so it can help you reach these goals, right? But it's more about the system, lesser about the goal in itself. And that's totally what these numbers will help you do. They will help you develop a system. And that's what I think one of the most important takeaways of dieting and of nutrition is have a system around it. Don't just try to approach diet by luck, because I think you're going to fail yourself. And we will do that, and then we will bolster that failure with all sorts of excuses and ideas and false realities to substantiate why it's not our fault or why we're where we are at this point.
Got the Orthodox monks going again
The Druids are chanting
to talk about the dangers of orthodoxy too, and why I think the point that you brought up about researching your orthodoxy is most important. I was discussing this with a dear mentor of mine that I touch base with every other week, and I read for you sort of my take on this idea of orthodoxy, or there being some kind of a divine wisdom, and recognizing that we're all swimming in the same water. I said I can't help how I feel. I can only help my response to it. Just talking about life. Why instill within me this electrifying radiance? Why channel through, since the dawn of ages, the timeline of mankind, this ever-present, all-encompassing master puppeteer? We distill this multifaceted complexity into common terminology, wielded against us in the form of law. From the great Grecian ethos to Shakespearean portrayals to romantic oil on canvas, this divine liturgy of the saints turned red roses on grocery store shelves. It's talking about the watering down of orthodoxy, and this is the dangers of it. This pressing notion, this mystery, this source of energy that compels us this way or that way. Why, great master, have you performed such painstaking trickery on us and only us creatures? Why this awareness beyond simply being subjects of biology? What is power? What is strength? How does one obtain it? How does one grow and sustain it? Is it by floating downstream, basking in the sun along this river's beaches, or by letting its currents crash against us, taking head on the tide and thus being electrified, a charging of ions as you float, as you fight your way upstream and others float by? Don't you see it's all the same body of water? Is it not destiny that matters after all? And I was talking about this idea of orthodoxy with Mr. Manning. And he said that something about Left Coast Caveman being almost this unknown orthodoxy that could spin into something that helps people short circuit the damage done by false orthodoxies. You mentioned, like, over the past few years, this 6 foot rule. This, and everybody's pitching, okay, there's a 6 foot rule. Okay, and now we wear masks. Why? Because it's, that's what we're supposed to do, is wear masks and this and that. And he these false orthodoxies, let's call them, or these common, this is how we should be. And he mentions the smartphone being the most destructive device ever in human history, that it's a tool for orthodoxies to run rampant. Kings, kingmakers, distractions to maintain power. Current modern government following Julius Caesar's template. Well, we're all seekers and voyagers, and we talked about short-circuiting the damage done to arbitrary material possessions. And really, why the importance for caveman. I think let's use caveman as encompassing all ancient wisdom. The Native Americans, the Mesoamericans. That's why our glyph draws upon this ancient wisdom. Because prior to there being this insatiable desire for power, that perhaps that's always been the case, and that's where orthodoxy ran afoul to better well-being, and then became a tool used to wield against us, as I referred to in my little excerpt there. But he was talking about, well, human beings at one point. Now we're back to this 10-minute rule. Human beings at one point harmonized with nature. They understood the intrinsic laws of nature. And in our seek for orthodoxy that we're bringing back, he's talking about us. He's following some of our material, bringing back to the Holy Land. For powerful men wanted more power, and government and religion came in. Seeking orthodoxy, trying to tap into something that goes back thousands of years, trying to tap into something you may not even see. It's a complex thing, man. We've been a long journey here, LCC 55, but we've covered a lot of ground, I would say, in recognizing that our purpose is to develop an orthodoxy, if you will, or this set in stone cave implementation, cave meditations. Here's what you do. Here's how human beings ought to, in this left coast environment, be more in keeping and more harmonized with nature. Why? Supreme being. How? How do you know? By the fruits. It's like, oh, well, then now I take my shirt off after doing this metric and I start looking better and I start feeling better. And all of a sudden I'm happier with people, or I'm starting to smile at my neighbors, and I'm not so worried about this or that. And I understand that, you name it, it's all encompassing kind of deal. But even like recognizing the need to kind of be cognizant of that orthodoxy, being, knowing that, we're just journeymen, we're just voyagers, and so is everybody else. So we're all these other influencers, and especially being wary of the people that go to the extremes, and the people that say this is the only way and the only way. It's like, it's not the case. Your job is to test it, know it by their fruits, or whatever, to use an old adage in scripture, and apply it to your life, and then develop as you go. Bring others with you, bring community. Put on a robe and do some chants.
Well put.
What kind of robe are you going to put on tonight? That should be a saying. What's your robe tonight?
What's your
Is it a
robe?
party
Yeah.
robe? You putting on the party robe?
Nah, I'm just that black on black, looking
All
stiff.
right. I've got my lemon and ginger. It's like a
Good,
clear
man.
cup. Lemon and ginger. That's my robe tonight.
Here we go.
Yeah. Any parting words in
I
the
think you
last
said,
6 minutes and 54 seconds we have?
I mean, sometimes, man, when it's said best, I almost don't want to adulterate with anything further because it was just such a great closure on it, man, an encapsulation of what we're doing. And I mean, I guess I will just leave one thing. I didn't want to say it, but I guess I will now because when you spoke about, and I think one thing we should definitely do is on the mentality piece. I'd love to have that scripture that you read from GK. Is that
GK Chesterton, yeah.
yeah,
We
man?
could we'll put
Put
that
that
on
on
there.
there. Yeah, you just superimpose it on there. Maybe write a few thoughts because I mean it's a as you read it more and more, I get more out of it. And I think that's kind of the case with most like philosophies or cool pieces of work, of art, or even of writing. And like as you spoke of going down the river in that tube, whatever vessel it was, and then talking about is it better to just go down it with the flow of the current or to go against it? And the image of Sisyphus came to my mind of like you don't have to choose. I mean, do both. Like paddle up against that current, and then allow yourself to drift down and continuously do that. I mean, like I don't know. That's kind of. I mean, that's why do you pick up a kettlebell every day? Why do you do it? Because it's there and it feels good and it gets you. I mean, it's a meditation in itself, right? It's that you do it because one, you can, and two, back to that divine notion, like you're doing something right. You just know it, right? And you talk about all these implementations of the cave and the things that we do, and it's like it all leads you to this divine knowledge of, yeah. I mean, I feel good. I feel joy. I feel you will know when you're on that path. You will know that when what you're doing is working because you'll experience more bouts of joy. You'll have a better impact on those around you. You'll feel better, look better, and you'll probably inspire some people around the way, and be it friends, family, strangers, your children. And so I think all of that. I mean, those are some of the things that kind of got sprouted in my mind from that piece that you quoted again. So I'd love to have that on there so I could look at it again, maybe at my leisure. And I'm sure the Left Coast Cave people would also enjoy that.
That was actually one that I wrote. GK was the one that wrote
Oh, there we
once
go.
I tried to develop a heresy of my own, and when I put the final touches on it, I realized I'd fallen or landed at Orthodoxy. But we got 4 minutes and 30 seconds left, and I want to ask you, this week compared to last week, am I more supreme being or less supreme being?
Is that for me?
For me,
Well, for you, I don't know. I mean, you tell
I
me.
would say
It's
that it was obvious. It was obviously the implement why I started this cast with when I fall way off and something goes wrong and I'm not achieving at my highest levels. The first thing I come to is this among other things, but implementing what we teach always leads me to a better place in life. And that's the core value of what we do. It's like, this is for me, man. This is for us. And it's always led to better well-being. And so when people ask me, well, what do you do? That's why we started sharing this stuff. What are you doing? You know,
yeah,
it's this. And so anytime I fall way off and know thy numbers and know the metrics and having these orthodoxies or these like places where we can come to and know which modalities to implement, that's why it's so important. Um, I can't introduce in 3 minutes the wrestling that I have though is that some of it is from implementing experiential wisdom and some of it is from implementing divine wisdom. And sometimes the divine wisdom cannot make you feel so good. But that's the upstream battle. That's the knowing that pain and suffering is where it's at. Pain and suffering is where growth occurs. That's the electrifying I was referring to. It's the destination that matters. We're all in the water. You're either going to float down and be breezy easy, or you're going to go through a little shit and end up upstream.
be worthy of your
The
suffering.
promised land. But every once in a while, you just want somebody to come through and like walk on the water or part that sea. Maybe that's what we're trying to do. Part a little sea for some folks. 2 minutes left, man. Good cast. Good talking to you. Appreciate you making time, even though you're in the mobile cave.
Buddy, there's
It's
always time
cool.
for this.
Well, good. Go implement some kind of modality. You might be implementing the modalities in the morning.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to definitely make up for the debaucheries that will be had. So great
Debauchery
cast.
modality. There should be a
Yeah,
debauchery modality.
I'll
I
field
like a
test.
good debauchery every once in a while. That's where the good stories come from.
Absolutely. Hey, no good story ever started with, "Hey man, I had way too much kale last night. You won't believe what happened."
Yeah, even Moses or Noah, one of those dudes from back in the day, like passed out, assed out, didn't they?
Hey man, that's that burning bush, dude. That was some DMT. That was the acacia bush that he was burning.
Mm-hmm.
He was smoking something, man.
All right, my brother.
All righty. Night.
Later.